The honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand today on behalf of Nanaimo Ladysmith to talk about regulating the shipment of oil tankers on BC's coast. What is at stake? I worked for many years as an ocean kayak guide. I had the great privilege of going to some of BC's wildest places, and I so appreciate the ferocity of the weather, the complication of our shorelines, the speed at which currents and tides move, how the water is never standing still on the BC coast, how extremely complicated it would be to clean up oil, and how hard it is to get to some of these places. Where you have the roughest weather, that's where it's going to take the longest time, the highest probability of an accident, and the longest time to get to a spill. And I know what is at stake. The coastal communities that are dependent on fishing, on tourism, on a pristine environment, people that live from the shellfish beds that eat the food of the sea, but also those that are deeply invested in the marine economy, the wild salmon economy, the aquaculture industry. And at the time that the Enbridge pipeline, Northern Gateway pipeline, was proposed, I again had the privilege, at a time that there was some semblance of a National Energy Board review that gave coastal people their voice, to be in hearing rooms and hear people with emotion in their throats and tears in their eyes talk about the beauty of taking their herring boat through, skimming fish zipping over the surface of the water, the sea life, the birds, the whales dependent on it. The connection to the coast is deep and heartfelt, and it's our livelihood, and it's why we're there. It's where we've come from. A lot is at stake. I was elected first in 2002, fighting a pipeline that was going to run through the southern Salish Sea, through the southern Gulf Islands. From the community work to fight, and we did. 4.5 years it took, but we did beat that pipeline, natural gas pipeline. I was elected to a local government with a conservation mandate. A few years later, as the chair of council, we got a real scare when bulk tanker dragged its anchor in Plumper Sound. That's the sound between Saturna, Maine, and Pender Islands. A near miss with its huge tank of Bunker C fuel. We heard within days, the head of the Department of Ecology in Washington State said it was a near miss, another couple of 100 feet, and that freighter would have been on the rocks. If its fuel tank had ruptured, it could have oiled the shorelines on both sides of the international boundary. And that's when the lights went on for us. This is 2010. 2009, the Haybee Lion was the first one. That was 2009. 2010 and 2011, virtually the same thing. Huge container ships. They thought they were anchored safely. They weren't. And we started as a local government asking questions about what is the oil spill response, how quickly, if there had been an oil spill, would response vessels have got there. Once we started digging around, we figured out that, in fact, Kinder Morgan was gearing up for an expansion of its pipeline. This wasn't well known. The fight against oil tanker traffic was focused on the north coast, but it turned out that this expansion was upon us as well. It's only just since 2007 that Kinder Morgan has been exporting in oil tankers out of our harbor, out of Vancouver Harbor, and so the phenomenon of shipping out an unrefined product is really still very new. So the lights went on, and then we started asking questions about bitumen. And to the Conservative government in the time, 2011, I started writing letters as Islands Trust Council chair saying, tell us about bitumen. Where's the science that says that it will float long enough for you to be able to respond to it? What is the response time that you need? Is the existing skimming technology adequate? They were all questions, 2011. And those questions remain unanswered today. We've never had a letter back from Liberal or Conservative ministers saying we have got a handle on that. And indeed, we have got repeated studies, peer-reviewed studies from the Royal Society of Canada, from Polaris, from the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine, all who say it is not clear how in a spill in marine waters, especially with rough water and with sediment, it is not clear how long bitumen will float. Now, right now, Canada's oil spill response regulations give, in the area where I represent, Salish Sea, this is in between Nanaimo and Vancouver, exactly the route of the Kinder Morgan tanker traffic that is happening now, let alone the seven-fold increase that will come if the Liberal government has its way and is able to force the project over the objections of coastal people. No one has been able to say that they know how to respond to it, and the response regulations that we have in place date from 1995. The Liberal government, despite its deep affection for the coast, and the Prime Minister saying, I am a grandson of the coast, I promise you I would do it no harm, those oil response regulations remain unchanged. And so a spiller in my region, where I'm elected to represent, has 3 days to get to the site of a spill and boom and contain the oil. And so I keep hearing my Conservative and Liberal counterparts saying, don't worry, we've got this in hand. Well, who could possibly count on regulations that date from 1995? Who would ever allow regulations to remain in place that give a spiller 3 days to get to the site of the spill? I met with the Kinder Morgan CEO, Ian Anderson, about 6 years ago. I gave him my best advice was, you know what, really you should be getting the Conservative government to up the oil spill response regulations. I know that he, as a corporate spiller, would respond faster because they wouldn't want the PR bad news of this. But that we continue to get these bold, broad announcement about the Oceans Protection Plan from this government, but not to have actually implemented the regulations, which would have some teeth. It's one thing to say we're going to do education, or we're going to do research. We need tighter regulations right now. The diluent that would evaporate off a dilbit spill is thought to be highly volatile, potentially so much in the very first hours of a spill that first responders may have to stay away. That hasn't been sufficiently studied, and we've got ample evidence that says that it has not. And if the first responders have to stay away, then after the volatility has evaporated away, the diluent has evaporated away, it may be that we remain with a crude that sinks faster. And so we need, again, to have both strong measures in place to protect first responders, but also fast response times so that the spilled material does not contaminate shellfish beds, the animals that live on them, the First Nations communities whose culture and economy is entirely dependent on a clean ocean. I do applaud the government moving forward with a North Coast oil tanker ban. It's very much modeled on the legislation from our colleague, Member of Parliament from Skeena-Bulkley Valley, the NDP MP there, and his Defend the Coast tour in support of that legislation was famous in British Columbia. Thousands of British Columbians came out to support that initiative, and so very much applaud the government for advancing it. As said before, we do wish that there wasn't so much ministerial discretion. We are concerned that accidents like the Nathan E. Stewart, which has so badly affected the Heiltsuk people just last year and continue to, that it would not be prevented, it would not be blocked by this. And we're, of course, continue to be extremely disappointed that the government has invoked closure on this debate, so we're not able to continue to elaborate on the remedies and try to be even more persuasive about closing some of the loopholes, the ministerial discretion around the types of fuel. That said, I'll be voting in support of the bill, but to friends and coastal people at home, I don't want us to have any false sense of security that the safety net is in place. If this government was really about oceans protection, it would tomorrow be legislating tighter response times so that our communities and ecology on the coast are safe from the threat of a bitumen oil spill. Thank you.